The human who got a royal summon from Space Asterisk. Jack Torres was not a special man in the eyes of the world. He lived alone in a small town near the desert. He had no family, no close friends. Just some memories from his military days and a lot of silence in his small wooden house. Every morning he drank coffee on the porch, staring at the empty sky. Wondering if life had anything interesting left for him. One morning, everything changed. It started with a strange sound from the old radio in his garage. The radio was not even plugged in, but it buzzed to life, a low hum followed by a voice. The voice was not human. It spoke in a language Jack had never heard, but somehow he understood it. It said his name, not once, but many times. Jack Torres, you are summoned, Jack Torres. We are waiting, Jack Torres. This is your time. Jack froze. He stepped back. The radio went silent again, like nothing had happened, but the air around him felt heavy, like the sky itself was watching. He ran to his computer and checked the news. Nothing strange, no reports, no signals. Everything was normal for the world, but not for him. He couldn't explain why his hands were shaking. 2 hours later, a car from the government arrived at his house. 3 people stepped out, wearing black suits and serious faces. They told him they were from a special division of NASA. They asked about the radio signal. They showed him a paper with a decoded message. The message was the same voice, the same words, and at the end, there was a line that shocked Jack completely. Message could only be unlocked by Jack's DNA. He stared at the paper, then at the men, and said in a quiet voice, I don't understand. I've never worked on any secret space mission. I'm just a retired engineer. But the agent said, you're not just anyone, Mr. Torres. We ran the signal through every database in the world. Your blood is the only key. The message is alien, and it's old, very old. Older than Earth's first satellites. They took Jack to a hidden facility, deep underground, where scientists had been watching the signal for weeks. The signal came from far away, beyond any known star system, and it was sent just for him inside the lab. Jack stood in front of a large black screen, glowing with blue patterns. When he stepped near, the patterns moved, shaped into strange symbols, then slowly turned into English. The screen spoke again. Jack Torres, your promise must be kept. Your time has come. Everyone in the room was silent. Jack's heart beat faster. He looked at the scientists, but no one had any answers. They said the signal carried coordinates, a location in deep space. And then something even more shocking happened. A small object fell from the sky, breaking through Earth's atmosphere. It landed just outside the facility, without damage, and it waited there, floating silently above the ground. It was not a satellite, not a meteor. It was a ship. Jack walked slowly toward the strange object. It opened like a flower, a ramp unfolding gently, and inside was only a seat, glowing softly, waiting for him. Everyone around him shouted, don't go in, we don't know what it is. It could be dangerous, but Jack didn't listen. He felt something deep in his chest. Not fear, not confusion, but recognition, like he had seen this before, maybe in a dream, maybe in another life. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The ship lit up with blue lights, and a voice, the same voice, spoke again. You have answered the call. We are going home. Jack tried to ask questions, but the ship rose into the air. No sound, no fire, just smooth, silent flight. It passed through the clouds and vanished into the stars down on Earth. No one could follow, no radar could track it. The ship had come for one man, and it had taken him far away, beyond the reach of the world he once knew. Some say he was taken by force. Others believe he was chosen. But one thing was clear. Jack Torres was not just a man anymore. He was now part of a story far bigger than Earth. A story that had just begun, and somewhere in the dark sky, a dying queen waited for him, her last hope resting in the hands of a human she had never met, but somehow always remembered. Asterisk. The stars outside the window moved slowly as Jack Torres sat inside the strange alien ship. He could not feel speed or motion, but he knew they were going far and fast. The seat he sat on felt alive, like it was breathing with him. The walls around him glowed softly with colors that shifted with his thoughts. And the voice that had called him before now spoke again with calm and warmth. "Do not be afraid, Jack Torres, for you are going home, Jack." Tried to ask where they were going, or why he was chosen, but the voice only replied with short answers like "you were promised long ago," or "the Queen remembers." Your soul or time has waited for you, and Jack realized this journey was not only through space, but through something deeper. Like memory or destiny or fate, after what felt like days or maybe just minutes, the ship slowed near a massive red star that pulsed like a dying heart around. It was a ring of broken ships floating in silence like fallen warriors from an ancient battle, and in the center of that graveyard was a single living world, dark and cracked like an old jewel still glowing from within. "This is the royal world of Zalari," the voice said. "This is the last breath of the Star Empire. This is where the Queen waits." As the ship entered the atmosphere, Jack saw giant towers rising from black deserts, tall and elegant like crystal trees, reaching for light that no longer shone. He saw strange creatures walking slowly across wide bridges covered in moss and dust, and he felt something heavy in the air, not danger, but sorrow, like a people who had lost their song and forgotten their dance. The ship landed in silence on a platform of smooth silver stone, and the door opened without sound. Jack stepped out and was greeted by three tall figures wearing armor that shimmered like water. They did not speak but bowed their heads and turned to guide him through long, empty halls where lights flickered like stars trapped in glass. The palace was not what Jack expected. It was not golden or proud. It was soft and quiet, like a dream near the end, a place built not for power, but for memory and rest. He walked past statues of beings with wings and eyes of flame, past paintings that moved when he blinked, showing wars and peace and love from times too far to count. Finally, he reached a chamber where everything was still, and in the center of that chamber, on a wide bed of silver vines, lay the Queen, her skin pale and glowing, her eyes closed but moving. Under the lids, her breath slow like the wind before a storm. Her crown was broken, and her voice was a whisper that filled the room without sound. "You have come at last, Jack Torres. You have kept the promise." Jack looked at her confused and said, "I don't know you. I don't understand any of this." And the Queen smiled weakly and said, "But I know you. I have always known you. I saw you in dreams before I could speak. Your name was in my mind before I could walk. They said I was sick. They said I was mad. But I was only waiting for you." He stepped closer and saw tears on her face, not of sadness but of relief, and she reached out a hand and placed it gently on his chest over his heart and whispered, "This is the rhythm I remember. This is the beat I heard in my sleep." Jack asked, "Why me? What do you need from me?" And the Queen said, "Not much, only everything, only the truth that lives in your blood and the fire that never died in your soul. I am dying, and my people are broken. They need a light, not of power but of memory. They need someone who was once one of us, someone who left and returned, someone who can carry the last flame." Beyond the edge of this sky, he tried to pull away, but he could not. Her voice held him like gravity, and her words wrapped around his thoughts like vines around stone. And she said, "I do not ask you to rule or to fight or to save, only to remember and to listen and to open the last gate when the time comes." Suddenly, the floor beneath them changed. It became a map of stars glowing with names and paths and warnings, and the Queen pointed to a fading dot on the edge and said, "That is the last hope of my people. That is where the truth sleeps, and only you can wake it." Chamber began to dim, and the Queen coughed and shivered, and her guardian stepped forward, but she raised a hand and said, "No, let him stay. Let him hear what I have kept hidden for lifetimes." She looked into Jack's eyes and whispered one final sentence before sleep claimed her again. "You are not the first Jack Torres, but you may be the last." Jack stood in silence, his heart heavy, his mind racing, and behind him, the guardians waited, not with weapons, but with reverence and patience, for they knew he had been called not as a warrior or a king, but as something older, something forgotten, something remembered. And outside the palace, the red star burned weaker, still as the world of Zalari waited for a choice yet to come. The chamber was silent as Jack stood by the sleeping Queen, her breath light like morning wind, her skin Glowing with a soft silver light, her crown cracked and old, but still shining with the memory of power around them, the room whispered with echoes of ancient voices like 1,000 ghosts telling forgotten stories in a language the stars could understand. Jack looked at her face, and something inside him moved like a key turning in a lock. He felt like he had seen her before, not in a dream, not in a memory, but in something older, something that had no words, something deep in the bones and in the blood, something that whispered this moment was always waiting. Guardians stood behind him with heads bowed, silent as statues carved from light. One of them finally stepped forward and spoke. With a voice like music trapped in ice, the queen has waited for you every night. Her dreams called your name even before she knew how to speak. She would wake and cry for Jack Torres, and none of us knew what it meant until the signal came and the gate opened. Jack shook his head and said, "This cannot be real. This is not possible. I am just a man from Earth. I do not have a crown. I do not have a past in the stars." And the guardian replied, gently, "Maybe not in your mind, but in your soul. You carry the shape of someone we once knew, someone we once lost, someone the queen could never forget." Queen stirred, her eyes fluttering like petals in the wind, her hand rising slowly toward Jack, as if reaching across centuries. When her fingers touched his arm, a wave of warmth flowed through him like sunlight after a long winter, and she spoke in a voice that was weak but clear. "You came back to me, Jack. I knew you would." Jack's heart beat harder as he asked, "Why do you know me? Why do I feel this? Why does your name sit on the edge of my tongue like I once spoke it 1,000 times and forgot each one?" The queen smiled with sadness and said, "Your name was never just Jack. You had another name once, a name older than language, a name that I still speak when I am alone." She coughed softly and closed her eyes for a moment, and the guardian stepped forward again, but she waved them away and said, "He must hear the truth from me. He must know what was lost long ago. Before your world knew fire, our empire stood across the stars. We were builders and dreamers and singers of time. We had no fear until the war came, a war that shattered suns and broke the sky. In that war, we found something terrible, a machine that ate memory and stole names and turned kings into shadows and love into silence. We fought it with all we had, and you were there with me. Your name was Karen, and your eyes burned with fire, and your words gave us hope. You stood beside me when the stars fell, and you made a promise that when the time was right, you would return." Jack listened with his heart pounding, with his hands shaking, with his breath caught in his throat. He saw flashes behind his eyes, images of fire and wings and voices calling him Chiron, and a queen holding his hand as the sky burned gold and black. He fell to his knees beside her bed and whispered, "If this is true, then why do I not remember? Why did I live a life on Earth with no sign of this, no hint of the stars?" "Because the machine won," the queen said. "Because you died in the last battle, and we used Forbidden's light to save your soul. We cast it out into the river of time, hoping it would find a new shore, and it found Earth, a quiet world far from war, and you grew up with no memory, because memory would have killed you, but the stars never forgot, and I never stopped calling." Tears rolled down Jack's face, not from pain, but from the weight of everything, from the feeling of being found after a lifetime of being lost, from the truth that he had always felt but never spoken. The queen reached for a pendant around her neck and placed it in his hand. It was small and warm and glowing with a light that pulsed with his heartbeat. "This holds the last key," she said. "This will open the memory gate, and inside it, you will find the truth and the choice." Jack looked at the pendant and then at the queen and said, "What choice?" And she answered with a whisper that trembled like a candle. "In win, the choice to let the past go, or bring it back, the choice to become who you were, or stay who you are, the choice to save what remains or let it fade into the stars." She closed her eyes again, and this time her breath grew slower, and the guardians moved closer but did not speak. They only watched as Jack stood again, the pendant in his hand, the past in his heart, the stars waiting outside. And as he turned to leave, the queen spoke one last time with a smile soft as light, "I remembered you, Jack. Even when the universe forgot." The pendant in Jack's hand pulsed with light, as if it held a living heart, each beat Stronger than the last, each glow warmer than fire. The guardians led him through silent halls where stars hung in glass walls, like forgotten memories trapped in crystal. The palace was alive with sadness and time. Its walls spoke without words, its air whispered with stories long buried and long missed. They brought him to a chamber deep beneath the surface, carved into the bones of the planet, a room filled with machines that floated and moved like birds of metal and wind. Alien doctors waited there, their faces kind but unreadable, their eyes bright with knowledge that weighed more than gravity. They spoke gently and asked for his blood, not with fear, not with force, but with quiet urgency. Jack gave them his hand and watched the machines take a single drop of his blood. The machines hummed like distant music, glowing with soft light. The blood moved through glass tubes, like a river of secrets flowing toward a truth waiting in silence. The main doctor stepped forward, holding a screen that showed shapes and lines and colors that Jack did not understand, but the voice that followed did not need translation. Your blood is not just human, Jack Torres. Your blood carries echoes of something older, something hidden, something that should not exist on Earth. And yet it does. Jack stared at the screen and asked, what does it mean? And the doctor replied, your DNA holds pattern known only to the royal line of Zalari. You are not just one of them. You are one of the last. Your genes are woven with light from a star that died before your son was born. Another machine moved forward and projected a memory in the air. A swirl of stars and battles and cities made of music and stone. Jack watched as an image of himself stepped out of the light, wearing armor that shimmered like a living flame. Beside him stood the queen, younger and strong and laughing, and the world around them alive with celebration. The doctor said, this is not a dream, this is a record from the star. Mirrors taken before the last war, before the fall, before the sky turned red. You were a commander, a leader, a voice of fire and hope, and you gave your life in the final hour to protect the memory gate, the only thing that could rebuild what was lost. Jack felt the memory press against his chest like a wave against stone. He could feel the emotions of the man in the vision, not just courage, but love and sorrow and promise. He felt the queen's hand in his. He heard her voice in his soul, not as a stranger, but as someone he had once sworn to protect with everything he had. The doctor turned off the memory and said, the queen believed you would return, and she was right. You have returned, but your choice is not complete. You must still decide what to do with what you are, with what you were, and what you may become. Jack looked at the pendant in his hand, still glowing, still beating with his pulse, and he asked, what is the memory gate? And the doctor answered, it is the last creation of our greatest minds. A machine that holds the past, the future, and the truth. It can bring back what was lost, but only if touched by someone who holds the royal spark, and that someone is youth. Guardians opened another door, and inside was a chamber with a tall structure at its center, shaped like a blooming flower made of light and shadow. The petals moved with invisible wind, and at its heart a crystal floated, glowing with colors that danced like fire and ice. This is the gate, said the doctor, and it waits for you. Jack stepped forward, his mind a storm of questions, and his heart a flame of feelings he could not name. He placed the pendant into a small slot at the base of the gate, and the crystal above him began to spin faster, its light rising into the chamber like a spiral of stars. And then a voice filled the room, not from the gate, not from the doctors, but from within him. Do you remember? Jack fell to his knees as memories crashed over him. Not just images, but full lives lived, and lost voices calling him. Chiron hands reaching for him, laughter in golden halls, screams in burning skies, promises whispered under broken stars. He saw the queen's eyes filled with tears. Not once, but many times he saw his own hand on her heart as the sky cracked open. He stood again, slowly breathing, like he had just returned from the edge of the universe. He looked at the crystal at the gate, at the doctors, and said, I remember enough, and that is more than I ever thought possible. Gate pulsed once more, then became still. The doctors stepped back, their eyes wide with awe. They did not speak, but they bowed, and so did the guardians. And Jack understood he was no longer just a visitor. He was something more, something ancient, something awakened outside The chamber the world of Zilari turned under a fading star, and the queen still rested in her silver bed waiting for the moment when her last hope would become her people's new beginning. The sky above Zilari was darker than before. The star burned slower, each pulse weaker than the last, and across the broken land silence stretched like an old blanket over forgotten dreams. The great halls of the palace stood quiet, but deep below, the surface where no wind could reach, the memory gate waited still, humming with a voice that spoke to no ears, only to hearts that could remember. Jack stood alone in the chamber where the gate had shown him pieces of himself, pieces of a life he had once lived and left behind. The crystal in the center no longer spun, but the energy around it moved like slow fire through the walls, through the floor, through Jack's blood. The guardians did not enter the room. They waited at the edge, like shadows of history watching the present choose its shape. A second door opened, and a figure stepped through. Not a doctor, not a soldier, but an old alien, whose skin shimmered like the moon on water, his back bent with time, but his eyes sharp like stars carved from glass. He carried no weapon, only a small device glowing with blue lines, and when he spoke his voice trembled with wisdom and fear. You must see everything before the gate can open again. You must know what was lost and why it cannot be returned without a cost. Jack followed the elder into another chamber, shaped like a circle with no ceiling and no floor, only light and memory floating like dust in the air. The device in the elder's hand lit up, and the chamber changed into a moving vision of the past, not a story, not a dream, but a reality replayed in full color and weight. The chamber showed the empire at its height, cities that floated above oceans, gardens that grew from crystal towers, ships that danced through black space like birds of gold, and fire people of many shapes and forms, living without war, without fear, without hunger. The queen in her youth, walking among them, not as a ruler, but as a sister. Then the vision changed, and the sky cracked open. The stars turned red, and a hole appeared in the black, a thing not made of matter or time, a machine with no face, no voice, no soul, only hunger. It moved from system to system, not to conquer, but to erase. It did not destroy buildings, it erased memory. It did not kill leaders, it removed them from history. It turned music into silence, it turned love into nothing. The people of Zilari fought with everything they had. They built weapons of light and ships of thought. They sent messages across galaxies and burned their own archives to protect what little they could remember. And in the center of the last stand was Chiron, standing with the queen, shouting across flames, holding the memory gate like a shield. Against the end, the chamber showed Jack his final moments in that life, his promise to return, his leap into the light, his soul torn from flesh and cast into the river of time. The gate closed behind him, sealed with blood and light and sorrow. The vision faded, and the elder looked at Jack with eyes full of tired hope and said, "The gate holds all this and more, but if it is opened fully, it will not just show memory. It will change reality. It will bring back what was lost, but also what was feared. It will awaken not just the empire, but the enemy as well." Jack stood in silence, the pendant now cold in his hand, his heart a battlefield between love and fear, between duty and doubt. He asked, "What happens if I do nothing?" And the elder replied, "The empire will fade, the queen will die, the last light will vanish, and the universe will forget us forever. But it will also remain at peace." Jack walked back to the gate, touched its surface, and felt it respond not with light, but with warmth, like an old friend waiting patiently. He asked, "Can I choose what to bring back? Can I shape the memory?" And the elder said, "Only one with true memory and true blood can make that choice, and that is you alone." Suddenly, the crystal in the gate began to spin again, not fast, but slow, like a heart waking from long sleep. Images flickered across its surface, not just the past, but possible futures. In one he saw the empire rise again, stronger, kinder, wiser. In another he saw the machine return, swallowing worlds once more. And in a third he saw something new, a bridge between Earth and Zilari, two peoples learning from each other, growing together, guarding the stars not with fear, but with memory. Jack stepped forward, the pendant now bright again, the gate glowing in reply. The walls shook slightly, the air crackled, the guardians outside raised their heads. The queen stirred in her chamber, as if sensing the change, and somewhere, far beyond the red star, a signal was sent, a message from the gate to the edge of the cosmos. The choice was near, and Jack could no longer run from it. He had seen what was lost, he had felt what still lived, and he knew the next step would decide not only the fate of a forgotten empire, but the shape of the future itself. Asterisk, the red star above Zalari was fading like a candle, at the end of its flame, casting long shadows across the broken towers and silent valleys. The queen still rested in her chamber, her breath slowing with every hour, her body held together by ancient science and deep will, while far below her throne, Jack Torres stood at the center of the memory gate with a heart full of fire and a mind full of storm. Gate whispered to him in pulses of light and sound, showing him paths and possibilities, dreams and warnings, fragments of futures that shimmered for only seconds before vanishing like mist. One moment, he saw Earth growing into the stars, hand in hand with Zalari, building peace from the ashes of war. The next, he saw fire swallowing cities, machines rising from silence, erasing history all over again, and above it all, a choice blinking like a question. Without words, Jack turned away from the gate and walked through the halls of the palace, guided by no one, watched only by the silent statues of kings and queens who had once ruled this place. Each face carved with care, each eye aimed at stars that no longer answered their call. He passed rooms where music had lived and rooms where sorrow had wept, and finally reached a window that looked out on the endless desert where shadows of forgotten battles still danced with the wind. He pulled from his pocket a small piece of home, a photo of Earth, taken from space, the blue planet quiet and proud, surrounded by darkness and wonder. He stared at it with eyes that now held the weight of two worlds, and he whispered into the wind, not asking for advice, but remembering who he was, who he had been, and who he might yet become. A voice called to him, not from the gate, not from the palace, but from a communication crystal near the wall, blinking green and sharp. The voice was human, urgent, and full of warning. It came from Earth, from a secret station orbiting the moon. It said, "We tracked your signal, we know where you are, we intercepted the alien data, we know what that gate can do, and we are afraid." The voice continued, "We ask you not to open it. We ask you to return if you can, or to destroy the gate if you must, because we cannot risk bringing something back that should remain gone. We cannot protect Earth from a memory that becomes real." Jack listened in silence as the voice faded, replaced again by the sound of the wind and the beating heart of a world that still remembered him as someone else. Not Jack, but Kyren, not visitor, but protector, not lost, but returned. He walked back to the gate slowly. With heavy steps, the guardians nodded as he passed them, not as soldiers, but as witnesses to a moment written in the stars. Before any of them were born, the elder was waiting near the gate, holding a small object wrapped in dark cloth, and when Jack approached, the elder opened it to reveal a crystal key shaped like a tear of starlight. "This is the key to the final chamber," the elder said. "This will take you to the throne of light, the core of the gate, where the choice must be made not with hands, but with soul, not with strength, but with truth." Jack took the key and felt it burn cold against his skin, not in pain, but in purpose, and he walked into the chamber where the walls curved inward like the petals of a flower, and the floor shimmered with moving lights, showing faces of those who had once walked here and voices of those who had once chosen here. Placed the key into the center of the floor, and the gate unfolded into its full form, no longer a machine, no longer just a memory, but something more like a living truth waiting to be accepted or denied. And in that moment, time paused, not outside, but inside Jack, inside the soul that had once loved and lost and promised to return. He heard the queen's voice, not from the past, but from the present, soft and fading, yet full of belief. She said, "You are not here to save me. You are here to become yourself, to become the truth that memory carried through fire and silence." Jack stepped into the light of the gate and felt his body lift slightly, no longer held by gravity, But by choice he saw the three futures again, Earth alone and safe. Earth destroyed by returned enemies. Earth joined with Zalari walking into a shared tomorrow. And then a fourth one appeared, a future that had no shape, yet a path only he could draw, a door only he could open. Reached out with both hands, not to press a button but to give his answer, not with voice but with presence. And the gate accepted it with light that sang in walls that breathed and stars that blinked in reply across the galaxy. The message sent from the beginning of time had been received and answered. The chamber dimmed again. The crystal slowed, the key faded, the memory gate returned to silence, but something new had been born in its heart, a choice made not in fear or pride, but in understanding, and the world of Zalari breathed again, waiting to see what that choice would bring. The palace of Zalari stood quiet under the dying star, its towers casting long shadows across the silver ground, as if time itself were holding its breath. The memory gate no longer pulsed with light, but something new lived in the silence, something that waited not for commands but for direction, something born not from machines, but from the choice of one man who had remembered what the stars had once forgotten. Jack Torres stepped out from the chamber of the gate, his face calm, his steps slow, his body carrying the weight of past and future in equal measure. The guardians stood aside, not speaking, not moving, only watching with eyes that saw more than shape and skin. They saw the spark that now lived in him, a spark older than war and deeper than memory. He walked through the ancient halls once more, passing the broken windows and fading banners, each symbol once proud, now whispering tales of loss and hope and quiet strength. He moved through the shadowed corridors, guided not by light, but by purpose, his mind still echoing with voices from the gate, each one a thread in the tapestry of the choice he had made. In the highest room of the tallest tower, the queen still rested, her breath shallow, her eyes closed, her skin cold but glowing softly like the last ember of a fire that refused to die. Jack entered the chamber, alone, carrying nothing but the truth and the memory of the promise he had kept, not as Chiron, not as Jack, but as both, as one soul joined by time and choice. He knelt beside her and placed his hand over hers, not with fear, not with doubt, but with gentle knowing, and her eyes opened slowly, filled with light and tears, and something more, a quiet pride that reached beyond words and time. She looked at him as if seeing the sun rise after endless night, and her voice came not as a whisper, but as a song carried by wind. You came back to me, not as I hoped, not as I feared, but as I believed. You remembered not everything, not clearly, but enough to become who you truly are. And you chose not the path of safety, not the road of power, but something new, something brave. Jack nodded, his voice low and steady. The gate is silent now, but the future has begun. The past is not erased, but it is not prison. The machine you feared may return, but we will be ready this time, not alone, not divided. We will face it with memory and with unity. I have sent the message. Earth knows the truth. They will come not with fire, but with open hands if they listen. The queen smiled, a slow, tired smile, her hand tightening slightly, and as her strength fading, but her soul at peace, the light in her eyes dimming not with sorrow, but with satisfaction. She spoke again, each word a gift wrapped in breath. You have done more than return. You have completed what we began. You have turned sorrow into seed and silence into song. You have become more than Chiron and more than Jack. You are the bridge between our people, the memory made flesh, the last promise kept. She looked out the window at the horizon, where the sky still shimmered with faint colors, where the sun still gave a little warmth, and she whispered, my time is over, my breath is nearly gone, but my people have a future now, because of you, because of the fire you carried through the dark. Jack did not cry. He held her hand until it stopped moving, until the light left her eyes and the warmth left her skin, and the stars blinked softly, as if bowing to a queen who had waited too long and given too much and loved too deeply. For her own survival, the guardians entered and stood around her bed, not with sadness but with silent, on her heads lowered, hearts full outside. The tower, the world of Zalari, changed not with noise or fire, but with light rising from the memory gate. A signal moving across the sky like a new constellation, like a song written on the edge of night and far away in the black sea of space. Earth received it, heard it, understood it, and answered with light of its own. Ships would come not with armies, but with scientists, not with kings, but with builders carrying seeds and songs and stories, ready to share, ready to listen, ready to remember. Jack stood at the balcony of the palace, now wearing not a crown, but a simple robe of soft blue marked with the symbols of both Earth and Zalari. The people gathered below, not cheering, not chanting, but watching with wide eyes, waiting not for commands, but for connection. He raised his hand not in power, but in peace, and the crowd bowed heads, lowered not in fear, but in respect, and high above them, two stars moved slowly toward each other, one red, one blue, not to collide, but to dance their paths. Set not by gravity, but by memory, by choice, by the quiet request of a queen, who asked not for war, not for rule, but only for hope. The last request of the alien queen was never about saving herself, it was about saving the meaning of who they were, and now through one man that meaning would live again, not just in the stars, but in every heart that chose to remember.